Welcome to The Explainer, Year 9. Today, we're jumping straight into one of the most explosive, shocking, and, honestly, unbelievable moments in all of American political history. You know, we usually picture politicians debating in these grand marble halls, right? Wearing sharp suits, using incredibly fancy vocabulary to argue their points. But what happens when the words just run out? Today, we're unpacking the brutal events surrounding the crime against Kansas and the infamous caning of Charles Sumner back in 1856. Buckle up, because this is a story that absolutely proves history is way wilder than fiction.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to picture the absolute highest levels of government. We're talking about the place where the most important laws are made, where the entire future of a nation is decided. Now imagine the leaders in that room completely abandoning their debate, just dropping their arguments entirely and resorting to an all-out physical brawl right there on the Senate floor. I mean, it sounds like some crazy movie script, doesn't it? But no, this actually happened. And to understand exactly how things got to this insane breaking point, we really need to understand the massive conflict that was tearing the whole country apart.
Section 1. The Battle for Kansas.
So setting the scene, it's 1856, and the United States is locked in this fiercely bitter, high-stakes political battle. The country is rapidly expanding, new territories are being mapped out, and literally the burning question on everyone's mind is whether or not these new territories are going to allow slavery. And Kansas was right at the absolute center of this storm. Now, Senator Charles Sumner from Massachusetts, he had a very clear goal here. Kansas must join the U.S. as a free state. End of story, no slavery. But he didn't just calmly state his case. No, he made a massive, fiery accusation. He stood up and declared that Southern politicians were using violence, bullying, and flat-out political cheating to essentially force slavery onto these new territories. Basically, he was accusing the South of completely rigging the system. As you can imagine, this was a heavy hit.
Section 2. A fierce personal attack.
Because, you see, Sumner didn't just stop at attacking their policies. He made it deeply personal. He basically dropped what we'd call today a massive diss track right there on the Senate floor. He singled out his opponents, and he held absolutely nothing back. Just listen to this. Sumner argued that his opponent had a blind obsession with slavery, treating it like a beloved mistress. I mean, let the weight of that sink in for a second. He wasn't just saying, hey, I disagree with your politics. He was openly mocking the actual character of his political enemies. This explosive, incredibly personal insult was directed squarely at South Carolina Senator Andrew Butler. By comparing the horrors of slavery to this scandalous romantic affair, Sumner was throwing down a serious gauntlet.
Now, what's really interesting about this breakdown here is exactly why Sumner's words crossed such a massive line. He wasn't just nitpicking a single issue. He accused Southern leaders of actively breaking the law. He accused them of literally destroying the country itself. And he claimed they were completely, utterly desperate to protect and spread the system of slavery at literally any cost. He was deliberately, intentionally pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable political speech. He took a massive national crisis and made it aggressively personal against Senator Butler and his allies.
Section 3. The Chivalry Clash.
And this brings us to a really crucial cultural difference between the North and the South at the time. See, Southern gentlemen prided themselves on being these chivalrous knights. Things like honor, reputation, and defending your family name. Those were absolutely everything to them. But Sumner brilliantly and honestly very dangerously flipped that exact concept of honor completely upside down to mock Senator Butler. Sumner argued that, hey, true chivalry is supposed to protect the weak, right? It definitely doesn't enslave them. So he was essentially telling Butler to his face, you think you're this honorable knight, but your defense of slavery proves you're the exact opposite. Rhetorically, an incredibly powerful move, but practically, he was poking a very angry bear.
Section 4. The Brutal Climax. So the tension in Washington is just boiling over at this point. We've got the fiery speech, the incredibly personal insults, the total mockery of Southern honor. And then, just 2 days after Sumner's speech, a man named Preston Brooks walks right onto the Senate floor. Now, Brooks was a congressman himself, but more importantly for our story, he was the cousin of Senator Andrew Butler. Yeah, the exact same man Sumner had just publicly humiliated. And Brooks, he did not come to debate. He was absolutely enraged. Following his strict Southern code of chivalry, he felt his family's honor had been severely insulted, and he believed he had a strict duty to avenge it.
Brooks walks right up to Charles Sumner's desk in the Senate chamber. But he doesn't challenge him to a duel or yell at him. Instead, he takes out a heavy, metal-topped wooden cane and brutally begins to beat Sumner. He struck him over and over again, swinging so violently that the heavy cane actually shattered into pieces. Sumner was totally trapped under his heavy desk, completely unable to defend himself. and he was beaten unconscious right there on the floor of the United States Senate. A disagreement over laws and honor had morphed into this horrific, visceral physical attack. And incredibly, this always blows my mind, in the aftermath, supporters from the South actually mailed Brooks dozens of new canes to replace the one he broke. The national divide was just absolute.
So the crucial point is this: when that wooden cane shattered over Charles Sumner's head, something much, much bigger broke as well. The very concept of political debate in America had just completely collapsed. The systems that were meant to resolve differences peacefully, they had failed. The violence that everyone feared was brewing out in Kansas had literally walked right into the central halls of the U.S. government. The physical breaking of that wooden cane perfectly symbolized the absolute breaking of the country itself. And from this moment on, America was officially locked on to the inevitable, tragic path to the Civil War. So we have to ask, what happens to a country when its leaders trade words for weapons? When politicians can no longer just talk it out? When compromise is completely dead? And when sheer violence becomes the answer? The story of Charles Sumner and Preston Brooks isn't just some crazy random historical anecdote. It is a really dark warning about what happens when a society completely loses the ability to debate its own future. I want you to keep that thought in your mind as you continue to study the road to the American Civil War. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and until next time, keep questioning history.